I woke up later today than usual. I'll spend the morning working on the next draft. I think I did good yesterday, but it still isn't quite there. I feel like there isn't enough flesh on the bone. Maybe I'll go back with the original text and see if there's a new way to carve out the main ideas. Noticing I'm getting better at the editing process with these things. It seems like I've come to some kind of discomfort writing fiction the past while. As I write now, I realize that maybe it's a discomfort I always felt but wasn't able to recognize. That my ability to suspend my disbelief has diminished. I seem to have turned on it for whatever reason. And now, I'm about halfway through the year, and I have the sense that I'm about halfway through this book. I don't know. It's taking the time it's taking. Maybe on this draft I'll include that flashback scene at the end. I don't know why I keep coming back to it. It seems derivative in a way, for some reason. Somehow it feels like a beginning, and so maybe I have the sense that I'm approaching a middle. I'm again considering where things might have begun. I'm remembering a time coming up around 10 years ago. For me, I didn't hit rock bottom and then get sober. Instead, I got sober and then hit rock bottom. The way it seemed to be was that I broke myself by removing everything I was dependent on. And in many ways, that included a lot of the friendships I had. The severity of the loneliness that I felt was very difficult then. My therapist at the time retired and I began going to 12-step meetings. I suppose there was something about being in churches that ate at me. I found a small synagogue that wasn't too far from where I lived and began going there on Shabbat. I felt some sense of fulfillment when I did that, so I kept going when I could. Going over my notes from some things I was working on this week. I thought about the sides of myself that I was able to articulate in my writing and the sides of myself that I didn't. I imagined, for some reason, the river in Calgary. I stood there in the dark, holding a white plastic bucket. These kind of vague images that my imagination came up with were inevitable. I don't know what kind of use they always had. We went for a walk after Shabbat. Miriam told me that she imagined one day having a second baby, a boy. I nodded along. We went over the names that we'd thought of. She said that she wanted the boy to look like her. When we got home, we watched the newest episode of The Kardashians. I paid attention to the way they switched between the third person, when the characters acted more or less that there were no cameras around, and the first person, where the characters would reflect on whatever drama and sentiment that had unfolded. There was always a religious undertone to their behavior and language. It seemed like they'd found a way to align themselves with a good sense of faith that supported their lives. The genre of reality that they presented, while absurd in its affluence, was still anchored in a family tradition that seemed surprisingly grounded. I thought of the 12-step programs I used to attend. We admitted we were powerless over others, that our lives had become unmanageable. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. Humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I thought of this model and how required that we transcend our intellect, perhaps, and believe in something we cannot necessarily see. I went to pick Miriam and Nora up from the daycare. Nora sat at a table and ate Cheerios from a little cup. I knelt down and Miriam told me what they'd been up to. I met some of the other parents there. I had the sense that my discomfort translated to them as pretension, but still I tried to be humble. We took Nora to the sink to wash her hands. There was a woman standing there. She was in her 60s or 70s or so and wore a headband with some small flowers embroidered on it. She spoke in a gentle tone and began to warn us about the Cheerios that were there. How they had 5G nanomagnets inside of them. How they were being used to control us. It was all of the General Mills cereal, she said. There are many ways to transcend our intellect, to believe in something we cannot see. When we came home, I put Nora down and I took an ibuprofen from the medicine cabinet. As I sat to write, I considered the side of myself that thinks I am better than others, and the side of myself that thinks I am worse. They're both there, simultaneously. To focus on grounding myself into some sense of humility, to be aware of my weakness, to be aware of my strength, to stop trying to prove myself and instead to act as if I already was. To become today the dad that I want Nora to have. The one who lets her eat a few Cheerios at daycare. To suspend my disbelief enough to know that there is nothing to know. Miriam came into my office. She told me that she thought the last chapter I wrote was the best one I'd written so far. I was surprised to hear that. I had the impression that it was average. I'd already moved on to the next one. And still, I responded and I began going on about the idea of it, what it was, what it meant, of what I thought it was missing, of what could be improved. I went on until I realized that all I was doing was trying to defend myself against the compliment. I don't know why I do that exactly. That night I had a dream. I was with my dad. We sat on a couch somewhere. I explained to him that I could see now that I was too young to have published the book that I had all of those years ago, that I'd tried to take a shortcut, that I'd spent all of these years since, in a way, trying to earn the ability to write. In the dream, he understood, and I had the sense that he had known that all along. And from there in the dream, I walked through some Badland-type landscape with a baby strapped to me in a carrier. It wasn't Nora, but a baby boy. Maybe the one Miriam had imagined on our walk home the other night. We arrived at a camp. It seemed very welcoming to us. We saw there were many cars there, and they all looked very similar to ours. My perspective shifted, and I saw the cars from above. I saw a massive prehistoric-looking bird skeleton crawl out from under one of the vehicles. The entire camp scattered away as the birds swooped towards them, but we stayed. We saw two people in the distance kneeling on the ground. We went towards them and saw a blue portal in the dirt. They said we could go with them, that we would be safe. I looked at the boy and saw that he did not want to go, so we stayed. I don't have much of a sense of what that dream really meant. Maybe, in time, it will occur to me. Earlier, I thought that I would add an older scene into this chapter from how things were before. I'll go ahead and do so, even though I'm not sure it will quite work. Maybe in the second draft, I'll use it for the beginning of the book. Maybe it'll be okay here. Maybe I'll delete it entirely.